Well, we are finally here, September 4th, 2025, the official release of Season 3 Part 2 of Ninjago Dragon's Rising. This has been debatably the most controversial season, purely because of the leaks, and honestly, I do think that is very interesting to note. But after literal months of people having to avoid spoilers and people having to bite their tongue about what actually happened in this season, we can finally talk about it freely. Honestly, I have been looking forward to making this video since April. And honestly, I've got so much I want to talk about when it comes to this video, and I'm not going to hold back. So, if you haven't seen the season yet, it is a complete spoiler warning from here onwards. But let me not waste any more of your time, and let's talk about Season 3 Part 2 of Ninjago Dragon's Rising. A very brief overview going into the season. What we knew: Thunderfang was never truly destroyed. He is in his spectral form and he is reabsorbing souls to be able to get into the Council of the Source Dragons. His mission very much never stopped, and he is on his quest to be able to achieve his goal with the help of the recently newly acquired Forbidden 5. Meanwhile, the ninja were focusing their attention on finding Aaron's parents, as they recently just found out through Jay that they are in fact still alive. But Aaron and Sora do not know that, as they are now helping out Raz in his mission to reverse the merge, as Aaron believed that his parents were dead, and this was the way to get them back. And then of course, cue the event of this season itself, and I'm going to talk through the different plot points that we had, the developments we did get, and I'm also going to talk about each of the main characters individually, and an extra topic at the end that I think you could probably guess. But let me at first just go through the standard stuff you expect from any season of the show. The first thing I want to talk about in that regard is in fact the animation. I found that Season 3 Part 2 was honestly the most fluid that we've seen Ninjago animation in a very long time. All the characters flow really well, it translates quite well to most of the fight scenes. More on that later, but I will say that the animation does feel really good in this season this time round. Like I said, there's just a fluidity to it that I really do appreciate. You'll find that all the characters just have these really smooth animations. The characters really flow. It honestly doesn't feel stiff whatsoever, which is honestly very nice to see. The second thing up is the tone of the season. Honestly, it takes a much more darker approach in comparison to what we've had before. It's still very much the light-hearted Ninjago that we all know and love, and I don't think they're ever going to stray away from that, but there were genuine moments of darkness that I do think was really cool. I really do feel like they wanted to play about with these interesting moments and these interesting sort of indirect mentions that we get. More on that again later, but honestly, tonally speaking, it was quite good as well. And last but not least on these more general aspects is the music. Like always, the composers for Ninjago are absolutely brilliant, and in this season in particular, we do actually get music play into the season in a way. They had to have this composed bit of music to actually awaken the Arc Dragon of focus, and I really do like that very small aspect, and the music that they use for it is just very nice and just feels a lot like Ninjago. But finally getting those general points out the way, let's finally talk about some of the more specifics. Let's talk about the plot itself, and I'm going to go for the most part in the order that we actually get to see it in the season itself. There's some overlapping things, so it won't be purely in order, but let's talk about the plot. The first thing of note to me was definitely the fact that we kind of basically open up with a character dying. I mean, not in the indirect sense, in the literal way, because we do actually get to see the passing of Egolt. Honestly, it's a very emotional scene, and having everyone have their own reactions to the passing of him was very interesting to see. I'm surprised that they did get rid of him. I feel like it just comes down to the fact that they just didn't have anything more they wanted to do with him, so they just decided to get rid of the character. But honestly, it feels like we could have had more from him, and maybe one day they will expand on it, maybe in the comics. But honestly, his scene of him passing away is a very interesting emotional beat, and I do appreciate it for the most part, even if I do think it was a little too soon. The next thing we saw after that, and possibly one of the most controversial things that we did get from this season, is the fact that in the first episode, they get rid of Zane and Pixel. I mean, the whole thing is that they're going to go explore the merged lands together, and they're going to have their own journey. But they get written out of the season, and they quite literally never come back for the rest of the time. So this is literally the only time we actually get Zane for this season. To the point where I have my list of all the characters I want to talk about, Zane is literally not even there, because Zane has his one scene, and then they leave. Honestly, this was a major L when it comes to the season. I really do wish they didn't do this, but unfortunately, it's just the way that they decided to take. But they've written Zayn out of the story, and it makes me wonder how they're going to re-implement him into Season 4, if they even do that. All this really proved to me is the fact that the writers just don't really know what they want to do with Zayn, and they don't really have a direction for the character, especially when we were meant to be getting more Zayn when it comes to Season 3. I mean, he is quite literally on the box of the sets. It's just really disappointing to see that he quite literally got written out of the story. One of the main OG Core 4 Ninja is literally just not in this part, and it really is a shame, and you could argue they have done it for other characters, like Cole in Season 3 Part 1, or Jay for just Dragon's Rise, but at least there was like some sort of a plot reason for that to be the case. In this one, they quite literally just get rid of Zayn. Honestly, it's a very big downside for this season for me. The next plot point for me that I wanted to talk about was this offhanded comment by Jay. He mentions the fact that he was brought into the administration because the administrator himself wanted Jay to be collected and be working for him. Of course, we don't know who the administrator is, and by the looks of it, we will never find out because of what we found out through Comic-Con. But the thing is that they allude to this idea that the administrator specifically wanted Jay Walker, and I do think it's a very interesting thread that they could have picked up on if they wanted to explore the administrator route. Honestly, I kind of wish it wasn't even there because of this. I do want them to explain why and who the administrator actually is and what they wanted with Jay. It makes no sense, and the fact that this is in here is honestly kind of annoying, because I do want them to actually expand on this point, but we probably never will get it. Not long after this, we did get introduced then to the Underworld, which is interesting to finally actually get. It was one of the realms that I was definitely the most curious about, and for this to finally be explored was actually really nice. I do like the concept that it's just underneath the realms itself. It does really kind of come across though, as it never really truly merged with the realm. And I think that's actually an interesting concept to begin with, because it has a different entry as well. You can have to get in there by defeating this Guardian, and that's cool in of itself. But I want to know why this realm specifically seemingly was the most unchanged of the lot. And honestly, this season itself has opened so many more questions when it comes to the realm for me, or more specifically the merge realms. So honestly, I'm gonna have to do another merge video. But the Underworld was actually quite fun for what we got of it. Getting Cruncher and Knuckleback was quite nice, and having the classic music that they usually have was there is honestly, again, really nice to see. I also do like their designs. I do think it's a very fun design to get, and I honestly think they were fairly well translated to Dragon's Rising. I have no complaints with the two of them whatsoever. And the last thing that came from the Underworld was the Forge. The whole thing, the Forge is going to make more Source Dragon icons. I do think it's a very interesting concept. I really want to know why it's in the Underworld specifically. It's never really been kind of obvious as to why it would be there. I mean, you could kind of make an argument for it, but I honestly don't really want to. I do think, though, it's cool. I do think the Forge in of itself is a very cool thing to have actually seen. And the activation of the Forge is one of the things I said about being tonal. Because having to have someone step in and essentially sacrifice their life for the Forge to be used is really cool. And honestly, a really cool concept that I'm glad is in there, because I would not have expected them to have done that within Dragon's Rising. But speaking of realms, there is another realm, or more specifically land, that was introduced into the season, and it's definitely another one that I have to do a video on, and it's the realm of Lee, or the land of Lee. This is something I was really skeptical of, and honestly something that I was very worried about when we actually did get it. But honestly, the concept is so strange to me, I kind of like it. Having the realm of Lee, or the land of Lee, basically be an underground bunker where Lee is convincing people that the merge destroyed the realms is honestly a fascinating concept. And Lee as a character is also really interesting, because he is a very unique concept that we've never gotten within Ninjago, and I do think it's quite interesting to note that he truly did have this kind of control over all those people. Honestly, it makes for a really interesting character, and definitely one that had me curious on my watch. I'm definitely very curious when it comes to the skill set of Lee, the powers he truly has, the abilities he truly has, and how he was really able to accomplish the things that he did. Honestly, he is one of the more interesting things that came from this season, and definitely one of the most interesting aspects. My only problem is that in the episode where he was introduced, he has that musical number that lasts like 4 minutes. Honestly, that was way too long for my liking. I really do think they should have cut that down, and we should have just had more time in the land of Lee itself. But it was cool for the most part. I just feel feel like that part specifically was a bit too overdone. But the Realm of Lee actually does show the consequence of leaks in a very interesting way, because Lee uses this monster that he uses to mind control people, and if you look, design-wise, it fits perfectly in with Monstrosity. So, of course, we were meant to see this after that show was revealed, so it's making me wonder if they purposely had this in to intertwine with the Monstrosity shorts. So, now we've seen it beforehand, it's kind of bit nah, and I never really put the pieces together until I did my rewatch. So I'm wondering if this whole thing was meant to be an intertwining thing for Monstrosity, and we saw it in the wrong order because of the leaks. Honestly, I am very curious to get more answers when it comes to that monster that Lee had, because in my opinion, it's very clearly meant to be tying into Monstrosity. But like I said, the Realm of Lee is just really fascinating to me, and having Aaron's parents down there I do think was a really good way of getting his parents back into the story. I do think having them believe that Aaron was essentially dead was a great way of explaining away why we haven't seen his parents yet. It's a really good way of going about it, and I can definitely appreciate that for what it is. The only question that I have when it comes to the Lee stuff is that when Aaron saw his parents at the end of season 1 of Dragons Rising, it implies that they were somewhere else. Is that them realizing that Aaron was alive? Was that even his parents? I would like to know the explanation when it comes to that scene specifically. Honestly, it does create more questions than answers for me, and I wonder if anyone has a better outtake than I do. But for the most part, it seems to be that that's kind of going to be retconned now in the future, because it kind of did imply that Aaron's parents knew that Aaron was alive and vice versa, but obviously later on they all say that they thought the other was dead. So it must be some sort of error in my opinion, but maybe someone else has an explanation that I'm not seeing. The thing that came after this that was worth note to me was the conclusion of the Screaming Earth. Of course, it was set up in season 1 of Dragons Rising, and Cole never elaborated on it further, but it comes back up in the season itself. Cole, Kai, and Frak go back to where he was led to in season 1, and they actually all utilize their elemental power to accomplish what Cole couldn't do on his own. It calls back the whole unity aspect that Wu was saying about, which is honestly quite nice to see, but I'm not overly happy with the byproduct of this plot. In the end, it was revealed that the Earth was screaming because there was a Source Dragon remains on the underside of it. And like I said, the whole thing is that the three of them had to utilize their powers together in a way to bring the remains up. But the thing is that as soon as they bring it up, they just kind of do nothing with it. The Source Dragon remains just disappear, we get a cameo appearance from Wu, but that is literally it. They just go back then to the main plot. So it's a bit weird to actually see this. I kind of wish they expanded on just a little bit more so we had more context on what was going on. But the thing is that they just simply do not do it. I do wish that we just got more. I do wish that plot actually went somewhere, but it just doesn't, and it feels like that's it now. Is the Earth still screaming? Is there anything else to do with that plot? Not really. And setting free the remains, does it actually do anything for that Source Dragon? Which Source Dragon even was it? Like, there's no answer when it comes to this plot point. It's really annoying in my opinion, and honestly really frustrating to think that they brought it back just to kind of wrap it up in not even half an episode. This is a problem I'll go into a little bit later, but this is kind of one of the things of Season 3 Part 2. This is not the only plot that kind of just gets brought back up just to get completely thrown away at the same time. This is kind of just a problem with Season 3 Part 2 in general. But like I said, I'll get to that a little bit later, but this is definitely one of the biggest contenders for that point. The next plot point up I wanted to talk about was the case of the prismatic blades. Of course, they get utilized in Season 3 Part 1, and then they kind of just go by the wayside. Aaron still has his, but the whole thing is that the Finders refine the prismatic blades, and the ninja do start to use them, and they're kind of just useless against the enemies that they're facing against. And honestly, it's just a bit of a shame, because the whole thing is that they have this really cool unique power in Season 3 Part 1, and then they're rendered completely moot in Part 2. But the thing is, and the thing that annoys me, is that they become these new prismatic blades empowered by Imperium, and the whole thing is that they basically just get put in a glorified microwave. That is quite literally my note on the prismatic blade, and I quote, putting them what is in basically a glorified microwave, because that is kind of just what they do. Imperium just claim that they've been looking into prismatic steel because they knew about everything that was happening in Season 3 Part 2, which makes no sense, may I add. But the thing is that they put them in this microwave, and then they become these big red blades that do exactly what the prismatic blades were doing in Season 3 Part 1, and also now they all have the ability of the returning prismatic blade that Aaron had from Season 3 Part 1. It really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. These blades are really annoying. I'm gonna make a video on them because they really have annoyed me with this. Honestly, I was going to in Season 3 Part 1, but Krusty beat me to that. But I now officially need to talk about these blades because I really don't understand why they've decided to go at they're the same blades but they're different and they have all the abilities that the rest of them do. It just doesn't really do well. These are really annoying weapons. They make less sense the more they use them. In similar vein though to the new prismatic blades, the other plot point from this episode also really annoyed me, and that is the fact that obviously the whole thing is that people were becoming hollow, their souls were being taken away, and in this season it happens to Cole, and I'm going to talk more about Cole more specifically later, but they make Cole hollow, and it seems to be that they basically only did it to take him out of the plot, because none of the other ninja become hollow, even though they very much should have become hollow, but they do it specifically to Cole, and he has a really interesting arc around it that I don't really know how I feel about it. Again, I'll get into that later. But the thing is that this whole thing of making Cole specifically hollow, and the way it kind of happens is just really annoying. Of course, he just charges in knowing that he's going to get hollowed. He knows for a fact that he's kind of in a do or die situation. And honestly, it just does kind of feel out of character for him. So the whole plot point of Cole becoming hollow, it just feels like the way to take him out of the fight. I don't really like it. I don't really care for it. I would like to know if anyone wanted to see the Hollow Ninja. Again, I referenced some notes earlier, and the next thing I want to talk about, I quite literally dubbed basically all of episode 19, because this whole episode for me was just really weird, and I do think, again, because of the leaks, I think a lot of people don't really like this episode because it's the first one we got in a while. But the thing is that there's so much in this episode that I just don't really care for. This is the penultimate episode. This is meant to be hyping us up for the finale. And all we really got in this episode was Rapton turning up to Ninjago, which I don't really care for. He should not have been in the season. I thought they were alluding to the fact that he was going to try and get the teapot of Tyran, but they never actually go and do that, which makes it kind of even weirder. And the silent fight he has with the ninja just kind of sucks. We also get Power Lid back, or the ultimate object of admiration. It was really weird to get him back, and the whole thing with him was just a bit meh. He just wanted gems and he wanted a bargain with the ninja. It really did feel like a waste of time. The only good thing that came out of that scene was a really cool moment from Kai where he gets to talk about being more mature. I do think that's interesting to see, but also at the same time, it just never really mattered to me. Like, it's a cool moment, but we could have gone it elsewhere. Again, it just didn't really feel like it belonged in the episode. The only thing I really liked about this episode was the fact that we got Raz versus Geode and Alfonso Frohiki. Like, that's a really cool fight, and it was a really cool utilization of the two of them against Raz. Geo holds its own, using his power to meld Raz to the wall was quite cool. Honestly, seeing Alfonso try to take the hammer off him was cool. Geode using the hammer against him was cool. It was an extremely good fight. The only thing I'll find funny about it is the fact that they're both just knocked out at the end, and we never actually see them get back up. So in the back of my head, I'm wondering, is that just how they're going to write them out of the season as well? Because we never see them after that point. Are they just dead? Who actually knows? Although, speaking of dead, again, like I said, why is it that in this season, people just seem to know things that they shouldn't exactly know? It's really strange that we actually keep getting this fact, because also in this fight, Raz references the passing of Eagles. How does he know about Eagles? That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. It feels like it was just in there to make him look cool, and again, more on Raz later, but the thing is that for some reason, it just seems to be a problem with this season where people know things that they shouldn't really know. Like I said, now we've got it with Raz, we had it with the prismatic steel, and I think we get it again at some point, but I'm not entirely certain. But the thing is that it just has this really weird air of how is it that people know these things when they shouldn't? All of this is just me saying that I think episode 19 was the biggest disappointment of the season, and definitely my least favorite of the bunch. I'm not ranking the episodes by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely episode 19 had the most problems for me. But the thing is that episode 20 also has problems. Episode 20 does a couple of things that I just think is a bit weird. The first thing they do is that they establish that Object Spinjitzu can reignite the Unbidden Storm. I think that's a really weird way of giving Aaron something to do towards the end of the season, and I really do question the logistics of the fact that they've actually had him do something like that. Honestly, it feels very shoehorned in as the way to get Object Spinjitzu back into the plot in some way, and I just don't really care for the fact that that's how they did it. But after that did then come the final fight of the season, which is Thunderfang versus the Archdragon of Focus. And honestly, it's one of my least favourite final fights that we've had in all of Ninjago. In my opinion, it's nowhere near as good Thunderfang versus the Ninja in Season 3 Part 1, which I also think wasn't even the best. But it also doesn't really compare to Kai versus Noct. It doesn't compare to all the Ninja during the Blood Moon. It just doesn't really hold that kind of candle. It's just a really near fight where they just kind of slap each other around. It doesn't feel like there's too much stakes, and also it's just in this massive death arena. Where actually is it in the spectral land? Because it's just this big cloudy field. Honestly, again, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense, and it feels like it was basically there for a massive kaiju fight. So I just don't really care for this final fight on an overall, and I also feel like Aaron and Lloyd taking the lead to beat Thunderfang is just a bit meh. And even after that fight, I mean, we established then that the Spectral Land is just kind of in ruin. I mean, that well is gone, so how is Moro gonna help out people move on to whatever's next after this? And is Moro even back? I mean, a lot of souls do get returned, but Moro's soul didn't have a place to actually go. Is he just released now? I feel like we could have had at least something that showed that Moro is still around, if he even is. But honestly, it just led to so many questions, and I'll go into Thunderfang's death afterwards, but it just was really there. I've only got one more plot point to mention. I've kind of just gone through it. I don't really know how else to structure apart from just tell you it as it happened. But the ending, it's really interesting. I mean, the whole thing is that the ninja are panicking, their powers are on the fritz, which is interesting, and they all end up in the wrong realm, which is honestly quite cool. The whole thing of needing to get back to Ninjago to ultimately not be able to was actually quite interesting to see. And they all get locked out and they go into their own individual realms. There's a lot of theories as to which realm is which. I mean, Lloyd and Aaron are just in this big leaf realm, which seems to be setting up something to do with Lloyd specifically. The theory is that Kai, Jay, and Nia are in the realm of monsters, which is honestly quite cool, and it seems to be that the new ninja team are wherever the Shadow Dojo went. So it's going to be interesting to see how they go about that in the future, and that ending is pretty cool, having everyone separated. It's not a good ending by any stretch. It does set up Season 4 quite nicely, which I am appreciative of. The most interesting thing about this ending is the fact that you have Raz relishing over the fact that he has separated the ninja and he can finally get on with his plan. And it feels like they are finally setting up Raz to really be at the forefront of Season 4, which is great. I do want them to really hammer in now on the Raz plot. He has got all the building blocks there. It's officially time to give Raz his time in the sun. And like I said, it ends off with him with Wu's spirit in a box and he's ready to do his next part of the plan. And the ninja vowing that they're going to carry on and do what they do best. Setting up Season 4 quite nicely. But those are all the major plot points I wanted to talk about. I have now got mostly just characters that I want to talk about as well. But all those plot points I could honestly do a video on in general. I have a lot of them already planned and set up. But the thing is that the plots in general when it came to this season were really interesting, but also really meh at the same time. There are genuinely some decent things in here that I found interesting. I think the Underworld was great. I think Jay was great. I do think the Land of Lee was great. But you just then had the contrast of all the stuff from episode 19, the prismatic blades, the screaming earth, and Zane leaving. All those things are just so nah, like it's so difficult to describe what they actually are. But the thing is that I just wanted more. I wanted better. I wanted the J administrator thing, the underworld, the Land of Lee. Like that is Ninjago at its best. But then you got the contrast, like I said, Colby and Hollow, episode 19. These things that just feel so underbaked. And I do think that's the biggest point I can show when it comes to these plots, and that's why I wanted to give you all of these plots all at the same time, because you can see how I reacted. You can see some of these plots that I was so invested in. I wanted more of the underworld. I wanted more of Lee. I wanted more of the administrator. But the thing is that we just simply don't get it. We get it in favor of this really lackluster Screaming Earth resolve, and we get Zane just not being in the plot. We get all these things that just don't really sit well with me, and that is why this season is so weird. But that's where I'll leave the plots for now. I'll include it in an overall summary at the end. But let me talk about some of the things from the season that were just a little more minor in the way of the characters, but they were definitely still there, and I do have some thoughts on. The first thing that was up for me was of course the case of Aaron's parents. Of course they have finally been reintroduced into the plot and we finally have them back in the story. They're alive and they got reunited with Aaron. I mean, it's a really nice scene having them all come together. It's a very emotional scene because it's been something that we have had built up since the beginning of Dragons Rising. So seeing them finally unite was honestly really cool to see. The problem you have with this though is the fact that they reunite Aaron with his parents and then they're just gone. Like, they are completely gone. Of course, the plot called for Aaron to carry on with his mission, and the parents don't really have a place in that, but the thing is that they reintroduce Aaron's parents to basically do nothing with them. The thing is that they could have had something to do with the overall plot in general. They could have had Raz at the end take Aaron's parents. They could have had Raz do something towards the parents that keeps Aaron's plot going. They have essentially given Aaron his happiness, and if they wanted to make Aaron more interesting and give him more of an angry arc, more of a personalized anger when it comes to Raz, they really could have had Raz do something with his parents, but they don't. His parents are just kind of there. We never see them after the point of episode 18. We see them very briefly in episode 19, I guess, but literally for a couple of seconds. They could have done so much with Aaron's parents, and they could have had them fully intertwined with the plot. Of course, they've built up this whole thing of Raz and Aaron and the whole thing of his parents, so I thought that was what they were alluding to. I thought they were going to have Raz do more when it comes to the parents, but he literally didn't, and that is really confusing to me. Why did they introduce Aaron's parents just for them to have nothing important to do when it comes down to it? It's one of the biggest letdowns, in my opinion, of the season. They could have had a setup to do with the parents. They could have had them involved. They could have had them as part of the stakes. But they literally didn't. It feels like they just decided to finish up the Aaron plot. Honestly, they should have done more with the parents. They should have done something that would intertwine them into season 4. Have Aaron, at the very end, maybe even see a vision that shows Raz there with Wu in the cage and his parents next to them. Honestly, it could have been cool. It could have been interesting, but they just simply never did it. Next up is Raz's master. Again, we still don't know who Raz's master actually is, which is a bit of a shame to see, but of course we're still getting little bits and little tidbits and stuff like that. It seems to be that next season is going to be where we finally get to know who his master is, which is nice to have, but it's definitely getting to the point where we just need to know who he is. Of course, he has now been alluded to for 3 seasons, so it's definitely time to actually get more. He was kind of just there for the most part. They didn't put too much emphasis on his master. Raz has a couple chats with him and that's about it. Honestly, I was expecting a little more. At least we know it's not the Source Dragon of Strength. Although speaking of the Source Dragons, that was another thing of this season. Of course, the Source Dragons are now turning their back on the mortal world. The whole thing is that they don't want anything to do with it, and they didn't want the ninja to even get their hands on the actual Arc Dragon of Focus. Which is very interesting, I have to say, but at the same time, it feels a little bit out of sync. Of course, they kind of come across as these very caring beings, but now it's established that they're just kind of not really, which almost proves Thunderfang right, and I do wonder if that's their intention, but for the most part, having the Source Dragons kind of turn their back, and at the very end have half of them not even there anymore, is definitely interesting to see. And honestly, like I said, with the powers on the fritz, it'll be interesting to see how that affects the season going forward. And the last character, or more specifically dragon, I just wanted to mention briefly was the Arc Dragon of Focus itself. Of course, the whole thing is that it was set up to have this multi-realm activation, 3 points at once to be able to turn him back on and face up against Thunderfang, which is cool, and it makes me wonder how it would have worked pre-merge, but I do think for the most part the Arc Dragon of Focus was alright. I do wish it had more of its own free will, because like I said, Lloyd and Aaron controlling it was just very weird, but at the same time, I do just think for the most part, they did fine when it comes to the Arc Dragon. I'd be surprised if we ever see it again. But now let's finally talk about our main cast. Let's talk about our main ninja, and let's talk about the villains as well. And then we'll get to an overall. But the thing is that some of the ninja definitely got more, and some of them definitely got less. Starting off with Lloyd, he doesn't really do too much this season. My literal notes is just, I don't know what he necessarily does. The main thing is that he learns how to accept Aaron, he learns how to let Aaron go, he learns how to almost forgive himself, and also acknowledge the fact that by the looks of it maybe was Wu that did the merge. His whole thing is just acceptance, if anything. And it is cool, because the stuff with Aaron is alright. It really does feel like he treats Aaron with more respect this time round, and definitely the stuff with Wu is more interesting. I feel like the Wu stuff will be covered more later on, or more specifically in Season 4, but I do think for the most part, Lloyd's journey of acceptance is fairly minor for this season, but it was definitely enough for Lloyd, because he has had a lot in Dragon's Rising. So having this little tidbit and giving more space to other characters was definitely good. Next up was Kai. I do think Kai definitely had more moments of maturity in this season. It definitely stems from the fact that Monstrosity came out, and it definitely feels like they're leaning more into that side of him. But he does still have his flair. He is still very much Kai, and he's very much a welcomed addition to the season. He's definitely better than Season 3 Part 1, because he definitely does have his own moments within the season. The only thing for me is that in episode 20, he has this really weird comment to Jay, where he says about how he needs to forget everything he ever said about him being the worst ninja. And the thing is that you could round it down to Kai forgetting about the situation with Jay, but at the same time, it just felt very off, especially because of the scene he just had with Nia. But more on that when I do get to them. But apart from that, Kai was honestly just quite nice this season. I don't have much in the way of complaints with him. He's very much down the middle, and honestly, considering that he has adopted more of the monstrosity side of him, I definitely feel like this was a good point for Kai. He's not too much in the spotlight, but he's not completely forgotten about at the same time. He's honestly, like I said, just a very welcomed addition. Cole at the very least was in this season. He wasn't in Season 3 Part 1 basically to any capacity, so him actually being here and having something to do was actually quite nice. This actually does show off more of his aggressive side in this season, which I do think is interesting. There's been a lot of debate, I know, over whether or not Cole was actually in character this season, because he was very aggressive for what we usually know for him. But I will say, him losing the Finders, him losing essentially his family, is a relatively fine reaction. I don't really know what people are complaining about when it comes to it, but I do think for the most part it's an interesting side of him. But the problem is that he definitely still needs more. Cole needs so much more screen time. He needs an arc. He needs something to do in Dragon's Rising. This was, at least in my opinion, a step in the right direction, but it feels like he definitely has a very long way to go. But he is still fine, and I do appreciate the scenes he has in the season. Nia is possibly one of the ones I have the least amount to say about, I mean apart from for example Zane, but for the most part Nia's whole arc in this season was for the most part just intertwined with the stuff with Jay, and I'd rather mention that when I talk about Jay himself, because even though that's all she really has, that's not necessarily a bad thing. She still has some cool scenes, she still has great chemistry with Jay, she just feels like Nia, and her whole plot is intertwined completely with Jay, but the thing is that the forefront of that plot is Jay. So she's basically just serving another character's plot, but there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, because she's still fantastic in the season and of course has her moments. But speaking of Jay, he was debatably the best part of this season. He has got so much good stuff in here. He is really funny, he's got great timing, he's got great moments. He has done absolutely brilliantly in this season. I have no way in the way of complaints when it comes to him. He is absolutely amazing, and apparently he's only on Act 2 of his story. So we're just gonna get more, and just more of what we're getting already, which is great. Because at the end of the season, of course, he has his moment with Nia, where he realizes that he doesn't want to be bad because she makes him not want to be, and that scene is absolutely amazing. It's one of the best scenes we've ever gotten in Dragon's Rising. I think honestly Jay is just such a standout in this season. It feels like they've got such a clear vision they want with what they want to do with him, and I feel like they're definitely going for it. I'm so glad. Honestly, this is possibly the best Jay has ever been. I think Jay's in a fantastic position, and I cannot wait to see where he goes from here. The next ninja to talk about is definitely Aaron. He has his moments in the season. I like that he stands up to Raz. I like that he feels more confident in himself. And I do think that's a very good part of his character. He's definitely becoming more of his own in this season. Because not only does he do it with Raz, he also does do it with Lloyd at the end. Even though I kind of have my problems with that. The thing is that he has that, which is great, but his other arc is very weird to me. His whole thing is that he wants to quit being a ninja. He doesn't want to be part of it anymore, as he wants to spend time with his parents, and he wants to be able to help people, for example, that are in the land of Lee. I do think that's an interesting concept, but the thing is that his whole thing that he doesn't want to be a ninja and how he wants to quit is kind of just thrown away, The thing is that it's there, they do the final fight, and then it's completely gone. He's fully back in with the ninja, he has no intention on going to help the people of Lee, and he is just really back into the whole ninja spirit. And it makes me wonder why they even included this plot to begin with. They could have just not included it, and the story would have gone completely fine without it. So that's a really weird thing that I don't really understand why they included, but the thing is that apart from that, Aaron was quite good. I do think, like I said, he had some really interesting moments, and honestly some cool callbacks. For example, his fight with Raz, where he drops down using his foot and Raz catches him, it's a callback to season 1, but this time he uses object spinjitzu to be able to counter it, and honestly that's a really cool little callback and definitely one I appreciate. So Aaron honestly is still quite solid in the season. I don't have much in the way of complaints about Aaron, but the thing is, like I said, the whole plot of not wanting to be a ninja is just really weird. I just feel like they shouldn't have included that. Oh, and also like I said before, the stuff with his parents was just completely underbaked. But you can't talk about Aaron without talking about Sora as well. The thing is that she does have her moments in this season. She does have some really cool moments when it comes to Aaron. For example, when Aaron realizes that his parents are just gone. When they leave the underworld and he has to accept that his parents are not coming back, of course because he doesn't know yet. The thing is that he has this really good moment with Sora. And Sora, even though she doesn't have her own moments really in the show, or more specifically in the season, she definitely serves the plot of Aaron. And I do think that was mostly what she was there for this season, which again isn't really a bad thing, and she was cool for the most part, but it's just not really her season really by the looks of it. But that's fine, because she doesn't need a massive plot for the season. I mean, she had a lot in season 2, so I'm not actually mad at this fact. I just think they could have simply have had a little more for her maybe, but the thing is that she is great regardless. But the main standout for her is definitely her moments with Aaron. Fun fact, this next character, I actually forgot. I did the entire notes for this review, and now I've had to quickly insert him here. Ryu. I completely forgot about Ryu. He has his moments, I guess. He has his trainer moments with Rontu, which I do think are fine. The whole thing is that he needs to learn Spinjitzu, which is fun. It feels like almost like classic Ninjago, but it don't really go anywhere. And when he does eventually get to have his Spinjitzu moment, the thing is that it does feel overshadowed by the fact that it came right after the scene with Jay, which is just leagues better. Ryu just needs more. Ryu hasn't really had much to do since he lost his whole thing in season 1. He doesn't power up Sora anymore or anything like that, so he is kind of just there for the most part. Yeah, like I said, he just needs more. I forgot. I completely forgot. Like, the Spinjitzu's cool, but that's it. The second last of the ninja team is Wildfire in this case. She seems more evolved this season. I do think she definitely has her moments. She definitely seems to be learning more from the fact that she's dating Roby, which I do think is fine for the most part. Her knowledge of the City of Temples and the history of things is honestly getting somewhere. Honestly, I just wish that we got more. I wish we actually found out how she's been doing this and when she's been getting the time to actually learn all this knowledge. But I do actually like where Wildfire's going. Like I said, she just feels more evolved. She just feels more civilized. She has her Wildfire moments, which is quite nice to see, but at the same time it feels like her character is actually going somewhere now. And as someone who had their worries about that before, I definitely feel more vindicated at this point in time. But I will say a lot of her jokes didn't really land for me this season. I feel like they would for a lot of people, but they just simply weren't for me. But Wildfire was another fun addition to the season, and like I said, it actually feels like she's going somewhere now, so I can appreciate that. The last of the current ninja team then is Frack. Honestly, I haven't had too much to say about the character of Frack in a very long time because I just wanted more from him. And Season 3 Part 2 definitely has done that. He has some cool scenes where he's training with Cole and Kai. I do like the dynamic he has with them. I like the dynamic he has with a lot of the ninja, or at the very least the ones he's interacting with, because I couldn't tell you how he interacts with Zane. I couldn't tell you how he interacts with Nia, but what he has with Lloyd, Cole and Kai I actually think is quite cool. And honestly, the training they get is also nice to see. It's definitely better than the one we get with Ryu. But the thing is that he has this new love arc with Sora, or more specifically this one-sided love arc with Sora, and I don't really want to put any judgment on it yet. I know a lot of people have had a lot to say about it, but the thing for me is that we actually aren't seeing where this is actually going. So for now, I'm just going to say that the arc is there. It has its moments. I think it has 2 moments specifically, but the thing is that I just don't really want to judge it because it just feels completely incomplete, and I feel like Season 4 is going to be the thing that expands upon that. But apart from that, I think again Frack was fairly interesting. But that is all the ninja team for the season. The only thing that I did mention is the fact that Wu seems to be coming back into the story. Of course, he has been caught by Raz, and I do think that's his way of getting reintroduced, and I'm definitely curious to see the impact he does have on Season 4. Does this mean we're going to get Wu back in Season 4? I don't know. I really do not know. People are seeing this as confirmation of Wu, and I don't agree with that wholeheartedly. I don't know what they're going to do. I really am curious on what they do with it, but the thing is that even though it seemingly is going to be him being reintroduced, that's just kind of it, seemingly. But Wu is there. Let's see what he does. But last but certainly not least is the villains. Yeah, right. So we've got Spectral Dragonians. They do the most of what this season has to offer. They're the kind of main threat. The thing about this season is that it doesn't even feel like there's a villain almost. The thing is that the Spectral Dragonians turn up and they have their moments, and that's kind of it. They feel the most prominent of the bunch. And even though I don't agree with the fact that they're reusing the Dragonians, because the whole thing is that they were helped and they were saved at Season 3 Part 1, is honestly just really interesting. I would like to know the logistics of these guys, because it implies that they just kind of exist now. But like I said, they feel like the most of the main villain of the bunch. One above the Dragonians is then the Forbidden Five, and I'm not joking, I keep referencing my notes. All I said about the Forbidden Five is borderline insulting. They were disappointed in Season 3 Part 1, and they've turned up in Part 2, they don't have a single voice line, and they just stand there and they take souls. Honestly, they're going to get a Part 2 from me, because they were truly the most disappointing of the bunch. But nothing was more disappointing than Thunderfang. He is just a massive walking L this season. The fact that he's meant to be the main villain and the Lego sanctioned villain that they wanted is just borderline criminal. The fact that he just speaks once every few episodes, he just stands around, absorbs energy, he doesn't feel like the main villain at all, and he dies in a terrible way. He dies mid-sentence and just out of nowhere, to the point where on my first watch, I went, is he dead? I don't understand. Thunderfang could have been something so cool. He could have had something huge. He could have had an amazing arc. He could have had these amazing moments, but they literally do not do it. I don't understand why this is the case. I don't understand what the end goal with the Thunderfang arc was, but the fact is that they just simply do not bank on it. I don't understand what the plan was for him. He is so disappointing this season, and he is the worst part of this season. Honestly, if you're going to take anything from my review, Season 3 Part 2 felt like it didn't have a villain. It just felt like the ninja were just reacting. It felt like they didn't have a big bad. Thunderfang was barely even mentioned by name. Halfway through the season, the ninja still didn't know it was Thunderfang. Like, I don't understand the angle that they were going for. There was no angle here. What was the angle with Thunderfang? He better be gone. Honestly, I don't think they need him back. I don't even want the Forbidden Five back. I just don't want this done for anymore. Just get rid of all of them. Honestly, like I said, it's the biggest disappointment of the season. Thunderfang, by far, is the worst part of Season 3 Part 2. But with all that, that is everything I wanted to talk about for Season 3 Part 2. I have talked about all the characters and all of the plot points. I have talked about everything I feel like is worth noting in some in a more of a brief way, but that's because I want to make dedicated videos to a lot of things later on down the line. But the thing is that is everything that Season 3 Part 2 had to offer to us. So what do I think of it? Honestly, Season 3 Part 2 is just so down the middle for me. I have heard the arguments for the people who think it's good, and I've heard the arguments for people who think it is bad. And honestly, I do think that is a very interesting debate, but I don't align with either side of the spectrum. I truly think Season 3 Part 2 could go either way, and that is honestly my biggest recommendation for the season. I truly do not know how you'll feel about the season when you watch it for yourself. Obviously, I'm hoping you've watched it before you've seen this review, and that's why I want to know, before I say anything else, what do you think of Season 3 Part 2? I feel like this is the definition of a divisive season. I feel like there are definitely people out there that really like the season, and I definitely feel like there are a lot of people out there who really don't like the season. Honestly, this is why it's difficult for me, because there's so much potential here, but it feels like a lot of it wasn't even taken advantage of. Like I said before, there are so many plot points in this season that were brought up that I think are absolutely fantastic. There were clearly so many great ideas in this season, and it makes me wonder what season ideas were Lego's ideas and what weren't. Because like I said, the Screaming Earth stuff I just didn't really care for. The Zane leaving was a bit weird. The prismatic blades I just never understood. But at the same time, like I said, the introduction of the underworld again, and all the stuff with Lee, and all the amazing character development we get for a lot of these characters. Like I said, everything with Jay. Like, I want to know how this season is so divisive. I don't think it's the worst thing that has come from Dragon's Rising. Honestly, I don't know what my ranking of Dragon's Rising seasons are. I will do that later on down the line if you do want to see that. But the thing is that this is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I just feel like I was left wanting more, and I feel like I just got too much of other things that I just didn't want to see. Are there disappointing aspects of this season? Oh, 100%. The Forbidden Five were just downright terrible, and like I said, just insulting. And the fact that they were set up like how they were, and this is the end product of their arc, is just so sad to see. And the same thing goes for Thunderfang. Even though Thunderfang was never teased beyond the point of Season 3, the fact is that they wanted to introduce him as the next big bad, the next huge villain, and this as well is the outcome we got. It's just terrible for that reason. The whole thing with this season, and like I said, the biggest problem is definitely the villains. And I feel like that is the biggest point above all else, because villains are a fundamental aspect to any piece of media. You need an antagonist. You need something for the protagonist to go against. And it really did feel like the ninja didn't have that this time round. Like, of course, Raz was there, and Raz is possibly one of the best things that came from the season. I am so invested in the story of Raz. I want to know how it ends. I want to know the outcome for this character. But the thing is that Season 3 Part 2 doesn't put a priority on him. And that is a Season 3 thing in general, because, like I said, they wanted the Forbidden Five and Thunderfang. But the thing is that even though he's in the background and he has these amazing moments, it definitely feels like Raz, it is his time to come up to the forefront. Raz now needs to take the lead, and they now need to deliver on this amazing arc that they have got set up for him. Honestly, like I said, if we never see the Forbidden Five again and Thunderfang again, I will be genuinely happy to see that, because we don't need them anymore. Focus on Raz, give the ninja a villain, give them something to fight against, because like I said, it wasn't here. But if there's anything that you can take away from this review, it's just the fact that this is the definition of a season that I feel like is going to come down to your own interpretation. Because I truly do not feel either way about this season. There is so much I do like about it, and there's so much I don't like about the season. And for that reason, if I was to give it some sort of score, it would be firmly down the middle. It's a firm 5 out of 10 season for me. I honestly feel like there's an equal amount of good stuff along with the bad stuff. I truly do not align with the idea that it's good or bad, but I definitely see why someone would go in either of the directions, because if you truly like the good stuff, it would outweigh the bad. But looking at it through the lens that I did, there was just so much in both directions, I just simply could not ignore it. But that is why, on an overall, Dragon's Rising Season 3 Part 2 is an extremely weird season. There is so much good stuff in this season that I absolutely adore. There is so much in this season that you could fully take advantage of, and you could have such a stellar time with. There is so much that is got that potential. But like I said, it just got drowned out by so much other stuff that I feel like was just there for the sake of it, or just strange, or just weird. And that is the ultimate problem with this season for me. But that is about it for today, you guys, and thank you very much for watching, and I would love to know your thoughts on Season 3 Part 2, because we can finally talk about it now! Thank God, LEGO! Don't leak anything ever again! Okay, bye!